I may be living in another state for the temporary future, but that's not going to stop us from pumping out more of these construction updates. What's up guys, Dr. Coaster here on behalf of the Georgia Coast Connection, and welcome back to another ArieForce One Construction update. Before we get started, I just want everyone to know that all photos and footage included in any of these construction updates are free to use with credit. I'd also like to thank my Georgia Coast Connection partner Christopher as we gathered this content together. I'll link his pages down below. And from this video forward, it's not going to be just Christopher, but all of the people that you're seeing on screen here. These people have just gone out to the park and sent me their footage free to use, and I want to make sure they get as much credit as possible. I'll link their pages in the description as well. If you want to send in your own footage, then you can receive a shout out like this too. Last week we saw the Halloween festivities start to kick off, while the double up and outerbanked airtime hill continued to rocket up into the sky. This week we got a whole lot new, so let's get into this. Christopher went out to the park on Saturday morning and we talked through all the progress while he was there. So this should be a pretty solid recap considering we were able to communicate the entire time. In the same way that I always do, Christopher headed to the back of the park to check in on the status of the barrel roll and chili dip as they're about to pass over the arcade. And he found a huge surprise. As you can see here, the barrel roll and chili dip are officially being lowered into place. RMC hasn't gotten it entirely done quite yet, but the crane's on site and things are starting to move. And Fun Spot RMC, you know I love you guys, but you guys had to install this the week after I left. I've been waiting for this all summer. As playfully upset as I'm trying to be, I'm super excited to see this going vertical. At this point, we've probably got less than 5% of the track and supports left, and this thing's going to be finished. While I wasn't around to see this go vertical, I got to live vicariously through Christopher and the rest of y'all that visited the park this week. Getting into a little bit more detail on the barrel roll now, let's just check out the angle on this thing. Absolutely insane. This was definitely pretty expected considering what we saw in the renderings and what Joe Draves has proven to just be absolutely bonkers so far with the ride. But I just rode the Mosasaurus for like 3 days ago and this looks like it rivals that in whip. In fact, this is probably the snappiest of an element like this that we've seen since the barrel roll got removed off of Maverick shortly before its opening date. Showing you some more angles in front of the arcade now. That angle is just even clearer. Also from these angles that I'm showing on screen, you can see where the track is still laying around and that there's still some supports that need to be dropped into place as well. Considering that RMC has kind of jumped around from the outerbanked airtime hill to the double up and now the barrel roll, I'm expecting them to stay here until this is finished, considering that the crane is now on site right here in front of the arcade. I could of course be totally wrong, but considering how much they got done in this location this week, it seems like they could wrap this up and then end up connecting it to the big drop here in the near future. Last week we talked about the drop out of the big drop and how it didn't have much time at all to whip up in the barrel roll. So that means there's not going to be nearly as many supports with the big drop as we saw with the double up reaching its maximum height. So between the barrel roll and the big drop, not going to be a whole lot that needs to get done. It's going to be really low to the ground with minimal support, so you can imagine what I'm trying to explain here. Let's go ahead and take one last look at the barrel roll here and appreciate what it's going to be. The profiling is definitely intense and I can't wait to see the rest of it once it gets installed. Hopefully it'll be this upcoming weekend as I have someone else going out to the park to film for me. And with my excitement over the barrel roll, I almost totally forgot to talk about the chili dip. So here's an angle Christopher captured of that to give us an idea of what it's looking like. We saw the supports here get installed months ago and noticed that the angle wasn't anything crazy. But you gotta remember, this is also going into the quad down. So this is really just an appetizer for the final course of the ride. I kinda like to compare it to the pre-lift section. I think it'll perform fairly similarly, except the terrain's gonna be going a lot faster. Coming out of the ground hugger and zero G-roll behind the arcade, I'm gonna be really curious to see the pacing of ArieForce One once it reaches this element. If this coaster performs the way we're really hoping it will, and as I think it will, we should all get sent flying through this chili dip into the quad down to wrap up our ride on ArieForce One. Moving away from the arcade now, let's go ahead and check in on the status of the big drop and the double up. This sequence of elements are lining up to be the sleeper hit of this ride, and last week we saw them reach their max height and start to see the angle of descent of the big drop. This week it doesn't seem like too much got done here, but after just seeing what RMC accomplished with the barrel roll this week, that's not all that surprising. So let's take a look at some of the footage I captured last week before leaving. And now let's take a look at some of the footage that Christopher captured this week. Comparing the two, it does seem like maybe 1 or 2 more supports were installed right at the walkway where we believe we'll be able to walk under to get to and from the Scream and Swing. With all the progress that we're seeing in this area, that walkway should be pretty evident, similar to the way we have seen the entrance to the ride and the ticket booth here in the next few weeks. We knew that RMC and Fun Spot were really cramming in ArieForce One into a tight plot of land, but the ability to walk under this ride not 1, not 2, but possibly 3 times is just pretty mind-blowing. This ride is going to be intimately placed right along the midways of the park and should allow for some great on-ride and off-ride interactions between those riding the coaster and those walking below. I've ridden nearly 100 coasters at the time of recording this video, and I haven't ridden many coasters that will interact with the Midway the way the ArieForce One will. On a smaller scale, this is going to feel very similar to like a Gatekeeper, Velocicoaster, or maybe a Fury 325, the way it's going to fly over the Midways. Not to overhype it too much, but I think you get the point I'm trying to make here. After checking in on the double up and the big drop, Christopher headed down to the front of the park to see if anything was new with the station and outerbanked airtime hill. Now, I actually captured footage of this last week and forgot to report on it, but this area here has been smoothed out with gravel for what I expect will be paved in the near future. As to what this area will be, I would speculate that it's either going to be part of the Midway or area for maintenance to come and go. This area that I'm showing you here is located right next to the transfer track, right as you enter the park. So this is going to be one of the first areas you see upon arriving to Fun Spot Atlanta. With regards to the station itself though, we didn't see anything new here. However, there's definitely some new supports added to the outerbanked airtime hill since the last time I was here. You can see the profiling forming even further on the peak, and this has got to be at least a 70-degree bank. It's going to be wicked. This outerbanked airtime hill certainly won't be the size of others that RMC has done, but I think this might be the snappiest and whippiest they've ever made. As RMC continues to wrap up the barrel roll, I'm sure this is going to be soon behind it. RMC is certainly getting close to wrapping up this ride, and I know it's later than some of us wanted it to be. But just a little bit more patience, and soon enough we'll be riding this world-class coaster. Thank you all for watching. That was the 30th of many ArieForce One construction updates to come. If you don't want to miss out on more construction updates like this, then be sure to subscribe to the channel, as many more of these will be coming out, leading up to the opening of the ride. If you haven't already, then also be sure to follow Georgia Coaster Connection over on Instagram, your home for all things ArieForce One. If you're feeling inclined, you can follow me as well, at Dr_Coaster. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.